My brothers and sisters, listen to me carefully. There comes a moment in life when the phone stops ringing, when the people you expected to stand by you disappear, when friendships fade, relationships end, and the silence becomes loud. And in that silence, shaitan whispers, you are alone, you are forgotten, you are unwanted. But that is not the truth. That is the moment Allah is calling you closer. Many people fear being alone because they were taught that happiness comes from people, from attention, from companionship, from being chosen by others. But happiness was never meant to be outsourced. Peace was never meant to depend on human beings who are weak, emotional, inconsistent, and temporary. If everyone left you today, but Allah remained with you, you have lost nothing. In fact, you may have gained everything. Understand this reality clearly, my brothers and sisters. One of the greatest sources of pain in the human heart comes from expecting permanence from what Allah created to be temporary. We expect people to stay the same. We expect their energy, their loyalty, their attention, and their presence to remain constant. But Allah never promised that, not once. Every human relationship has limits. People get tired, people get distracted, people grow, change, weaken, and sometimes drift. Even those who love you sincerely can reach a point where they no longer know how to carry you. That does not automatically make them evil. It makes them human, weak by design, limited by nature. But Allah is not like that. Allah does not weaken with time. Allah does not forget due to distraction. Allah does not abandon because of inconvenience. When Allah takes responsibility for His servant, He does not step back halfway. He does not withdraw His care because you are struggling. He does not reduce His mercy because you are inconsistent. When a servant turns to Allah sincerely, Allah turns toward that servant with a closeness that no human relationship can match. Many people confuse abandonment by people with abandonment by Allah. This is a dangerous misunderstanding. Just because people leave does not mean Allah has left. In fact, very often it is the opposite. Allah removes people so that you stop leaning on them in ways you were never meant to. When people walk away from you, it hurts. There is no denying that. The heart aches, the mind replays conversations, and the soul asks painful questions. What did I do wrong? Why was I not enough? Why was I so easy to leave? But listen carefully. Not every departure is a judgment against you. Sometimes it is a correction for you. Allah is revealing what was never meant to be permanent. He is lifting illusions gently or sometimes forcefully so that you see the truth. Human beings were never designed to be your foundation. When Allah removes people, He is not always punishing you. Sometimes He is protecting you. Sometimes He is teaching you. Sometimes He is strengthening you. And sometimes He is answering a dua you forgot you made, asking Him to detach your heart from anything that could replace Him. Think about this deeply. If Allah wanted certain people to stay in your life, they would still be there. Circumstances would have aligned. Hearts would have softened. Paths would have crossed again. But if they left, then Allah allowed it. And Allah does nothing without wisdom, even when that wisdom is painful in the moment. We often beg people to stay when Allah has already decided it is time for them to go. We chase explanations when Allah is giving us clarity. We hold on tighter when Allah is teaching us to release with trust. This is where suffering multiplies, not because people left, but because we are resisting Allah's decree. Tawakkul does not mean pretending it does not hurt. Tawakkul means trusting Allah even while it hurts. It means saying, Ya Allah, you know why this happened even if I do not. And I trust you more than I trust my own understanding. When you lean too heavily on people, you give them a role. Allah never assigned them. You expect emotional security, validation, and stability from hearts that are themselves unstable. And when those hearts fail you, you feel shattered not because the loss was unbearable, but because the expectation was misplaced. Allah is teaching you something powerful here. Stop begging people to remain in roles. Allah never assigned them. People were meant to accompany you, not define you, support you, not sustain you, love you, not complete you. When you accept this, something changes inside you. You stop fearing abandonment so intensely. You stop molding yourself just to be kept. You stop tolerating disrespect just to avoid loneliness. You realize that being alone with Allah is safer than being surrounded by people who pull your heart away from Him. There is a quiet dignity in knowing that even if everyone walks away, Allah remains. Even if the world turns its back, Allah is watching. Even if no one checks on you, Allah knows what weighs on your chest. This awareness does not make you bitter, it makes you grounded. And when Allah becomes your anchor, people no longer have the power to destroy you by leaving. Their presence becomes a gift, not a necessity. Their absence becomes a lesson, not a collapse. Remember this, Allah did not remove people to leave you empty. He removed them to make space. Space for tawakkul, space for sincerity, space for a relationship with Him that is not crowded by dependence on creation. If today you feel alone, do not rush to fill the silence with anyone who will stay. Sit with Allah in that silence. Speak to Him. Lean on Him. Cry to Him. Because the one who never leaves is closer than you think, and He has been with you all along. My brothers and sisters, we need to correct a misunderstanding that causes unnecessary suffering. Not every empty space in your life is a punishment. Not every quiet season is a sign of loss. Very often, what you are calling loneliness is actually an invitation from Allah, an invitation to return to Him without distractions. We label silence as loneliness because we are uncomfortable with ourselves. We are uncomfortable sitting with our thoughts. We are uncomfortable facing our weaknesses, our fears, our unanswered questions. So we rush to fill the silence with people, conversations, messages and noise. Not because we need connection, but because we fear confrontation with our own hearts. Loneliness is not always the absence of people. Sometimes it is the absence of purpose. Sometimes it is the absence of Allah in the heart even when people are around. That is why you can be surrounded by friends and still feel empty. And that is why you can be physically alone and yet feel deeply at peace. Allah creates moments of solitude not to break you, but to strip away what was never essential. When you are alone, there is no audience, no performance, no image to maintain, no one to impress. You stop acting, you start being, and that is exactly where sincerity is born. That is where real faith begins, not the faith that looks good in front of people, but the faith that holds you upright when no one is watching. Many people fear solitude because it exposes them. It forces them to ask difficult questions. Who am I when I am not needed by others? Who am I when I am not praised? Who am I when no one calls my name? And that question is uncomfortable because for years, many people built their identity on being wanted, needed, admired, or chosen. When Allah removes the crowd, that false identity collapses. And that collapse feels like loneliness, but in reality, it is purification. Solitude reveals truth. It reveals which parts of your life were authentic and which were performative. It reveals which relationships brought you closer to Allah and which only distracted you. It reveals whether your peace was rooted in faith or borrowed from people. This is why many people run from solitude. They mistake discomfort for danger, but discomfort is often the doorway to growth. Allah calls some of His servants away from noise so they can finally hear Him. In the crowd, His signs are drowned out. In distraction, His reminders are ignored. In constant companionship, dependence grows quietly and dangerously. So Allah creates distance not because He dislikes you, but because He wants you awake. Look at your life honestly. The moments you grew the most were not when everything was comfortable. They were when you were alone with Allah, confused, uncertain, yet still turning toward Him. Those were the moments your faith matured. Those were the moments your heart softened. Those were the moments you learned reliance instead of attachment. Solitude is where you learn to sit with Allah without conditions. Not worshipping Him because life is good. Not turning to Him only when people fail you. But choosing Him even when there is no emotional reward, no applause, no reassurance. And that kind of faith is powerful. When you stop seeing solitude as a curse and start recognizing it as an invitation, your relationship with Allah changes. Your du'as become more honest. Your prayers become less rushed. Your tears become quieter but deeper. You stop asking Allah only to fix your circumstances and you start asking Him to fix your heart. This is why solitude is dangerous for shaitan, because a believer who learns to be content alone with Allah cannot be manipulated by fear of abandonment. Shaitan uses loneliness to push people into haram relationships, unhealthy attachments, and desperate decisions. But when solitude is filled with remembrance, Shaitan loses leverage. A heart that is comfortable alone with Allah is not easily tempted. Do not misunderstand this. Islam does not promote isolation from people. We are a community. We are meant to connect, to support, to love. But Islam does teach balance. It teaches that people are companions, not lifelines, additions, not replacements, means not sources. If Allah has placed you in a quiet season, do not rush to escape it. Ask instead, what is Allah trying to teach me here? What is He removing? What is He rebuilding? Because solitude is often the workshop where Allah reshapes the believer. And when that season ends, and it will end, you will emerge stronger, clearer, and less dependent. You will walk back into relationships without desperation. You will choose more wisely. You will love more cleanly, and you will never again confuse noise with peace. If you are alone today, do not assume you are forgotten. Perhaps Allah is simply asking you to sit with Him for a while, without interruptions, without competition, without substitutes. And that invitation, my brothers and sisters, is a mercy many never receive. My brothers and sisters, this is a truth many people resist, because accepting it forces change. We are raised to believe that happiness comes from being chosen, loved, included, and desired by others. From a young age, we are taught, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly, that if people accept us, we are successful, and if they leave us, we have failed. But this belief is deeply flawed. If happiness truly lived in people, then the most surrounded individuals would be the most peaceful. Those with the most friends, the most attention, the most admiration would be the most content. Yet reality tells a very different story. Some of the loneliest hearts belong to people who are never alone. Some of the most anxious souls are constantly surrounded. Why? Because hearts were not created to be filled by creation. Allah created the human heart with a specific capacity and a specific purpose. There is a space within it that no human being can occupy permanently. When we try to force people into that space, the heart becomes restless. It keeps demanding more attention, more reassurance, more presence. And people, no matter how kind, cannot sustain that burden. This is why reliance on people is exhausting for you and for them. When your happiness depends on people, you live in a constant state of emotional risk. Their tone affects your mood. Their absence disturbs your peace. Their approval becomes a form of currency. You begin measuring your worth by how much you are needed, how often you are contacted, how strongly you are desired. That is not happiness. That is emotional captivity. Allah never intended your peace to be that fragile. True happiness is not something you receive from people. It is something Allah places in the heart that trusts Him. That is why two people can experience the same loss, the same isolation, the same hardship, and one collapses while the other remains steady. The difference is not personality. The difference is where the heart is anchored. When your heart is anchored in people, every relationship becomes a potential storm. When it is anchored in Allah, relationships become calm waters, sometimes rough, sometimes gentle, but never capable of drowning you. Many people say, I just want someone to make me happy. But no human being was created to carry that responsibility. When you place that expectation on someone, you will suffocate them or resent them. And when they inevitably fail, you will feel betrayed, not because they were cruel, but because you expected from them what only Allah can give. This is why even good relationships sometimes feel heavy. The issue is not the relationship. The issue is the expectation. Happiness rooted in people is conditional. It lasts as long as circumstances remain favorable. But circumstances always change. People leave. Priorities shift. Emotions fluctuate. And when happiness is built on something unstable, instability becomes the norm. Allah, however, does not change. When happiness is rooted in Allah, it is not dependent on who stays or who leaves. It does not rise and fall with messages, attention, or companionship. It becomes quieter, deeper, and more resilient. You may still feel sadness, you may still experience loneliness, but you are no longer hollow. This is the difference between pain and despair. Pain is human. Despair comes from misplaced reliance. When you understand that happiness was never in people, something liberating happens. You stop chasing, you stop performing, you stop shrinking yourself to be accepted. You stop tolerating emotional neglect just to avoid being alone. You realize that being alone with Allah is not a deficit, it is a foundation. From that place, relationships change completely. You no longer enter them to be filled, you enter them to share. You no longer demand that people complete you, you allow them to accompany you. You love without fear because your peace does not depend on being loved back in a specific way. This is not emotional coldness, it is emotional maturity. Allah wants you to love people but not to worship them with your heart. He wants you to value relationships but not to build your identity on them. When you cross that line, the heart becomes heavy and restless. That is why Allah sometimes removes people not to punish you, but to correct your direction, to show you that the emptiness you feel is not because they left, but because you were asking from them what only Allah gives. And when you return that space in your heart to Allah, peace enters naturally, not dramatically, not instantly, but steadily. You begin to wake up without emotional hunger. You stop checking your worth in other people's responses. You feel complete even in silence. And when people do enter your life, they feel lighter because they are no longer responsible for your happiness. My brothers and sisters, happiness was never in people. It was always in knowing Allah, trusting Him and allowing Him to be enough. Everything else is a gift. Nothing else is a foundation. My brothers and sisters, one of the greatest lies people believe is that strength comes from being surrounded, supported, and constantly affirmed. We assume that if someone is alone, they must be broken. If someone is quiet, they must be struggling. If someone walks alone, they must be weak. But that is not how strength is built. Strength is not proven when everything is easy. Strength is revealed when support is removed and faith remains. When the crowd disappears and you are still standing, when no one is clapping and you still do what is right, when no one is checking on you and you still turn to Allah in prayer, being alone does not weaken a believer. If anything, it exposes what the believer is truly made of. When you are surrounded by people, it is easy to borrow confidence. It is easy to lean on encouragement. It is easy to feel strong because others are holding you up. But when you are alone, there is nothing to lean on except Allah. And that is where real strength is forged. Allah strengthens His servants through responsibility, not comfort. In moments of isolation, you learn to regulate your own emotions. You learn to stand without reassurance. You learn to face difficulty without an audience. This builds inner discipline, resilience, and sincerity. These are qualities that cannot be developed in constant companionship. Think about it honestly. When you are alone, you must make choices without being influenced by others. You must hold yourself accountable. You must motivate yourself to pray, to remain patient, to stay upright. This is not easy, but it is powerful. That is why solitude often feels heavy at first. Weakness resists responsibility. The soul wants shortcuts, validation, and comfort. But strength grows when you stop outsourcing your stability. Allah allows certain believers to experience isolation because He wants to strengthen their reliance on Him, not on people. When you learn to stand alone with Allah, you become unshakable later. Praise will not inflate you, criticism will not destroy you, presence will not intoxicate you, absence will not collapse you. This is balance. A person who has never learned to be alone often fears silence. They fear abandonment, they fear rejection. And because of that fear, they compromise their values, tolerate mistreatment, and remain in situations that damage them spiritually and emotionally. But the one who has tasted solitude with Allah knows a different kind of power. They know they can survive without attention. They know they can endure without applause. They know they can walk away without falling apart. That knowledge is strength. Being alone forces you to confront yourself honestly. There is no one to blame, no one to distract you, no one to hide behind. Your habits, your intentions, your weaknesses all become visible. This can be uncomfortable, but it is necessary for growth. Allah refines believers the way metal is refined through pressure and heat. Isolation is part of that process. It burns away dependence on people. It removes emotional laziness. It sharpens faith. This is why many of the strongest believers you will meet are not loud. They are calm. They are steady. They do not chase attention. They do not panic when people leave. They have learned that their strength does not come from numbers, but from connection with Allah. Understand this clearly. Allah does not isolate people He wants to destroy. He isolates people He wants to prepare. Preparation for what? For leadership, for responsibility, for deeper faith, for healthier relationships, for tests that require emotional maturity. If Allah has allowed you to walk alone for a while, do not interpret it as rejection. Interpret it as training. Training to trust Him without crutches. Training to obey Him without witnesses. Training to rely on Him without substitutes. And when this training is complete, you will notice something remarkable. You will no longer fear being alone. You will no longer beg people to stay. You will no longer build your identity on companionship. You will walk with quiet confidence, knowing that even if the path is empty, Allah is with you. That is not weakness. That is strength built the right way. My brothers and sisters, many people are waiting for life to change before they allow themselves to feel at peace. They say, when I have the right people, I will be happy. When I am married, then I will be calm. When I am no longer alone, then I will feel settled. And so they delay peace as if it is something that must be earned through circumstances. But peace does not arrive from the outside. Contentment is not the result of a perfect situation. It is a decision the heart makes when it trusts Allah's wisdom, even when life does not make sense. That is why two people can live in the same condition, face the same loss, and yet respond completely differently. One becomes bitter, the other becomes calm. The difference is not what they have, it is what they believe. Contentment begins when you stop arguing with Allah's decree. Many people suffer not because of what Allah decreed, but because they keep resisting it. They replay the past. They imagine different outcomes. They ask endless what-if questions. And in doing so, they reopen wounds that Allah is trying to heal. Contentment does not mean pretending that pain does not exist. Islam never asks you to deny your feelings. Even the prophets felt sadness, grief, and loss. But they did not allow those emotions to turn into irtirad against Allah. They did not say, this should not have happened. They said, Allah knows and I trust Him. When you accept that Allah's knowledge is greater than your understanding, the heart begins to rest. Contentment grows when you realize that what Allah withheld from you may have harmed you, and what He delayed may have shaped you. Not every unanswered dua is a rejection. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is redirection. Sometimes it is preparation for something better, not necessarily easier, but better for your faith. A heart that lacks contentment is always restless. It keeps scanning for what is missing. It measures life by comparison. It sees what others have and forgets what Allah has already given. And comparison is one of the fastest ways to destroy peace. Contentment, on the other hand, teaches you to focus inward, to ask, is Allah pleased with me? Instead of, do people want me? When that question becomes your priority, many anxieties fall away. You begin to understand that loneliness does not mean you are behind in life. Being single does not mean you are incomplete. Silence does not mean you are forgotten. These are conditions, not definitions. And conditions change, but your worth does not. Contentment also protects you from desperation. When you are not content, you rush decisions. You accept relationships that harm your iman. You compromise values just to escape discomfort. You chase people who are not good for you because being alone feels unbearable. But when contentment settles in the heart, you gain patience, you gain clarity, you gain the ability to say no without fear. You would rather be alone with dignity than surrounded with regret. This is why contentment is power. It frees you from emotional slavery. It allows you to live without constantly needing reassurance. It helps you see blessings that were always there but were ignored because the heart was too busy craving what it did not have. Allah places contentment in the heart of the one who trusts Him, not the one who has everything, but the one who believes Allah chose correctly. And this contentment is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows in your calm, in your patience, in your ability to wait without complaining, in your ability to smile without having everything figured out. My brothers and sisters, life will never be perfectly arranged. There will always be something missing, delayed, or different from what you imagined. If your peace depends on perfection, you will never rest. But if your peace depends on Allah, you will find calm even in uncertainty. Make the decision today to stop postponing peace. Accept where Allah has placed you. Trust where He is taking you. And allow contentment to settle in your heart, not because life is easy, but because Allah is wise. That decision will change how you experience everything else. My brothers and sisters, much of what controls people's lives is not love, not logic, not even circumstances. It is fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing people, fear of the future. And these fears quietly dictate decisions, relationships, and even faith. Fear thrives where reliance on people exists. When your emotional security is tied to people, fear becomes constant. You fear their absence, you fear their change of heart, you fear their silence. And because of that fear, you begin to live cautiously, desperately, sometimes even dishonestly, all to avoid loss. But when Allah becomes enough for you, fear loses its power. This does not happen overnight. It happens when the heart slowly shifts its reliance, when you stop seeing people as your safety net and start seeing Allah as your protector. When you understand that everything you fear losing was already temporary, but Allah is permanent. Fear is rooted in the illusion of control. We fear losing people because we think they are what keep us whole. We fear the future because we think we must manage everything ourselves. But Allah reminds us again and again that control was never in our hands to begin with. When you truly accept that Allah controls hearts, outcomes, and timing, something inside you relaxes. You stop panicking over what might happen. You stop replaying worst case scenarios. You stop measuring your worth by people's presence. You begin to say, if Allah allows it, it will come. If Allah removes it, I will survive. That is not resignation, that is trust. When Allah is enough, you no longer fear abandonment. Because even if people leave, Allah remains. Even if plans fail, Allah's plan continues. Even if doors close, Allah opens others, sometimes quietly, sometimes later, sometimes in ways you did not expect. This reliance creates emotional courage. You are no longer afraid to speak the truth because you are not desperate to be accepted. You are no longer afraid to walk away because you are not terrified of being alone. You are no longer afraid of silence because you know Allah hears even unspoken du'as. Fear also weakens faith when it is left unchecked. It pushes people into impatience. It leads to haram relationships. It causes rushed decisions. It makes people settle for less than what Allah intends for them all because they are trying to escape discomfort. But when Allah becomes enough, patience becomes possible. You wait without anxiety. You trust without constant reassurance. You face uncertainty without panic. This does not mean fear disappears completely. You are human. Fear may visit, but it no longer controls you. It no longer dictates your choices. It no longer whispers lies that you immediately believe. You learn to respond to fear with remembrance, with prayer, with trust, and slowly fear loses its authority. One of the clearest signs that Allah is becoming enough for you is this: your emotional reactions soften. Things that once terrified you now feel manageable. Situations that once consumed your thoughts no longer dominate your heart. You realize that you have survived every difficult season before this one, not because people saved you, but because Allah carried you through. And that realization is powerful. When Allah is enough, you stop living in survival mode. You stop bracing for disaster. You stop assuming loss is the end. You understand that whatever Allah takes, He replaces, if not with something better in this world, then with something greater in the next. This reliance also restores dignity. You do not beg for love. You do not chase validation. You do not tolerate emotional harm out of fear. You trust that what is meant for you will reach you without desperation. My brothers and sisters, fear shrinks when trust grows. And when Allah becomes enough for you, fear no longer leads your life. Faith does. My brothers and sisters, this final lesson is difficult for many to accept because it goes against emotional instinct. We are taught that we must find people in order to feel complete, that relationships will fix the emptiness, that companionship will heal the wounds left by loneliness. So we search, we chase, we attach, hoping that the next person will finally bring peace. But this approach often leads to disappointment. The truth is this: when you need people to be whole, you attract the wrong ones. Need creates pressure. Pressure creates imbalance. And imbalance creates unhealthy attachment. You tolerate what you should not tolerate. You accept what damages you. You stay where your iman weakens all, because the fear of being alone feels worse than the pain of being misused. Allah, in His wisdom, delays certain relationships until you are no longer dependent on them. This is not punishment, this is protection. When your heart learns to be content with Allah alone, something changes in the way you relate to people. You stop approaching relationships from a place of lack. You stop asking others to fill emotional gaps. You stop expecting someone else to give you purpose. And that is when relationships become healthy. A heart that is full with Allah does not cling. It does not panic when distance appears. It does not demand constant reassurance. It loves without suffocating and lets go without collapsing. This is why many relationships fail before they even begin. They are built on emotional hunger, not emotional health. Two incomplete hearts looking to complete each other instead of two grounded hearts walking together toward Allah. When Allah removes people from your life, He is often removing those who were feeding your dependence, not your growth. And when He keeps you alone for a season, He is teaching you to stand without leaning. That lesson is essential, because once you no longer need people, you gain the clarity to choose them wisely. You no longer confuse attention with sincerity. You no longer mistake familiarity for compatibility. You no longer chase those who offer presence without principle. You choose based on faith, character, and direction, not fear. And when you reach that state, Allah sends the right people, not as saviors, not as emotional crutches, but as companions, people who add to your peace, not replace it. People who remind you of Allah, not distract you from Him. These relationships feel different. They are calmer, they are safer. There is less drama, less insecurity, less emotional bargaining. You can be yourself without performance. You can set boundaries without guilt. You can walk away without hatred if necessary, because your foundation is already solid. This applies to friendships, to marriage, to every form of companionship. A relationship rooted in reliance on Allah survives challenges. A relationship rooted in emotional dependence collapses under pressure. That is why Allah sometimes delays marriage, delays close friendships, delays companionship. He is not withholding love. He is refining the heart that will receive it. If Allah gave you people too early, they might have become your distraction. If He gave you companionship before independence, it might have become your weakness. So He waits until you are strong enough to love without losing yourself. My brothers and sisters, if you are alone today, do not rush this process. Do not compare your timeline to others. Do not assume you are behind in life. Allah's timing is precise, not late. The right people come when your heart is no longer desperate. The right people stay when your heart is no longer dependent. And the right people add peace when Allah is already enough. So if today you have no one, but you have Allah, you are not lacking. You are being prepared. And when the right people arrive, you will recognize them not by how much you need them, but by how little they disturb your peace. That is the sign of a heart that learned the lesson correctly. My brothers and sisters, if you take nothing else from this reminder, take this truth with you. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. Silence is not the same as being forgotten. And delay is not the same as denial. When people leave, it does not mean your value has decreased. It means Allah is rearranging your life in a way your heart cannot yet fully see. Every door that closed did so with Allah's permission. Every quiet season was allowed with purpose. And every tear you shed in solitude was seen by the one who never looks away. Do not measure your life by who stayed or who left. Measure it by who remained constant. Allah was with you before people entered your life, and He will be with you after they are gone. If He carried you through the loneliness, He will also carry you into what comes next. Learn to be at peace where Allah has placed you. Do not rush His timing. Do not envy the paths of others. And do not assume that your current season defines your future. When you have no one left, Allah is enough. And when Allah is enough, you are never truly alone. Hold on to Him, trust His wisdom, and walk forward with certainty, because the one who never leaves is guiding every step.